Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Vanderlei Silva to defeat Vitor Belfort. And that is why you probably shouldn't listen to me when I give you my predictions for this upcoming fight night event. What is this? UFC on ESPN? Whatever. Okay, opening up the card, which by the way is called UFC on ESPN 62. But opening up, we have Cong versus Victoria Leonardo. And this is yet another example of I'm picking this fighter, but I'm betting on this fighter. Because I'm fucking stupid. I'm stupid. But you know what? These odds are fucking stupid. And stupid odds call for stupid men. And I will answer that call every fucking Saturday. You have my word on that. But look, I'm not investing a lot in Victoria Leonardo. At the end of the week, it might be $5.62. I'm a nickel and dime shitheel. So it's not like I'm doing any serious betting on this. But this is just something where she's a gigantic favorite and it's a value bet. I see the value in her, and the value comes from MMA experience, which I know Cong is a seasoned fighter, but she still only got 5 MMA fights. And also, in general, Victoria Leonardo's got to at least have something to offer her on the ground, especially if she gets her in a bad spot. So, with her, I think there's a chance she wins, whether it's by submission or even smothering her to a decision. So, I'll take a shot on her. But my pick is Cong wins. And my pick is Cong wins in a way that might make it look like she was a steal here at minus 2,000 or whatever the fuck she's at. But I do think she wins, and it's by finish. Victoria Leonardo has been finished in 5 of her losses. She's got 5 losses, all 5 of which are by finish. And if she wasn't so breakable or fragile or whatever, I'd feel more confident wasting more than $5.83 on her or whatever. But I do think Cong will go through her, and it will be with violence. Victoria's been finished 5 times, all to excellent fighters, UFC level fighters. Miranda Maverick's the one girl to submit her. She also beat her by a 5-minute decision in an exhibition bout. She got TKO'd by Natalia Silva and Manon Fior recently, and also Erin Blanchfield head kicked her in Invicta. I'm aware that all 3 of those girls could be challenging for world titles in the next 2 years. But still, it's no coincidence that she's been finished in every one of those losses either. Whereas typically most girls aren't getting finished like that. Victoria Leonardo is more breakable. Although I'll say this, in her 1 TKO loss to Melissa Gatto, which was a head kick that broke her arm, I think she looked very tough there. Not only just her willingness to fight with a broken arm or whatever she had going on there, but also I think she would have made it to the final bell in that fight. Can't be certain, but would have been nice. Either way, it just seemed like maybe that's part of it, where it's her destiny to lose by TKO, but that's how she's lost. All 5 losses are by finish, and I do think if Cong is winning this fight, which I'm predicting she will, it's going to be by destruction. Cong only has 1 TKO finish in her 5 MMA fights, even though it's a head kick, which I do expect a head kick to be a part of the finishing sequence here. But she's still a very dangerous, heavy hitter. You could tell from watching her fights, the one she wins by decision, submission, whatever, you could see not just in the sharpness of her strikes, but in the footwork battle. She's the bully in there, and you could see the fear in her opponents. I think she's going to prove to be deadlier than her record suggests now, and she's going to be getting some finishes. And here's one where she has to strike here, pun intended, and get the finish over Victoria Leonardo, because she's a finishable girl. You know, she might be the female Jordan Wright or something. I don't know. But Cong she's only 5-0, but she's gotten a few nice wins. First, let me say she's got 2 wins by submission. So she's not a total fish out of water on the ground. Her first win ever is a round 2 rear naked choke. Her last win against Paula Luna on the Contender Series was a guillotine choke. She actually set that up standing and bowled her onto the ground and mounted her. And she's also got 2 decision victories, which are over the best opponent she's fought, I believe. Wu Yanan, former UFC fighter, and she beat Wu this year, and that was by decision where she looked really sharp for all 3 rounds, bullied Wu, defended takedowns, even kind of took her down briefly or tried to choke her or whatever for like 7 seconds. But it was pretty much a pure kickboxing bout. And yeah, she was bullying Wu for all 3 rounds. She mixes shit up well. She's got that slower stalking thing going on where she's trying to get the power shots off. But when she starts flowing, she starts spinning and the rest of it when she gets comfortable. And she looked good for all 3 rounds. As she did against Amena Hadeya, this girl that she beat. Girl's got like a 50-50, 500 record right now. But all 3 losses of hers are to solid fighters, and they're all by decision. So that might be a win that gets better with age. But still, it was a hard fought victory, and she's really shown no real weaknesses. In her 5-0 MMA record, in her MMA career, she's been pressed against the cage here, punched in the face a few times, but she's looked incredible. Also, I feel like I should have mentioned this at the top, like the UFC is gonna during the broadcast, but she beat Valentina Shevchenko in a kickboxing match many years ago, but still it happened. Doesn't matter when it happened, it's impressive. It's on YouTube, close fight, but yeah, she outpointed her with the deduction and whatever, and she got the victory. I think she's going to give a lot of trouble to Victoria Leonardo, and she's going to look more dangerous than she has in a lot of her recent fights as a striker. And she's going to remind everybody how dangerous she is and get a finish. That's my prediction here. I'll look to bet on her, but I doubt I'm going to. She's way too big of a favorite as the money line. So I think the prop bets just aren't going to be worth it. And it's not like you can count on her getting a round 1 finish or anything anyway. You can isolate it down to a round. That's my prediction, but it's still pretty tough. But I still think if she wins, it will look somewhat similar to the Natalia Silva fight, and that's what I envision happening. But yeah, the bet, of course, will be on Victoria Leonardo, and I'll see what the props look like for her. Her only real paths to victory are decision and submission. She's got 1 TKO. It's from the full mount over Chelsea Hackett, but much more of a ground fighter. But it's just slowing the fight down to the point where her opponent is neutralized or taking advantage over a mistake and securing a position, like she did to Haley Cowan in her MMA debut, which I made the mistake of watching that fight, and that's the only reason I've convinced myself to bet on her. Where she shucked Haley off. Haley was going for a head and arm throw. She popped out the back and choked her. That's the kind of shit that can happen in MMA. It's a very dynamic sport, so the seasoned fighter with the ground game gets a bet, but my heart's not into it. Cong Wang by TKO is the pick, and we'll see what happens. Okay, next up we have Vyacheslav Borshchev, Slava Claus, versus James Llontop, or James Llontop. And my prediction for this fight is Slava Claus wins. And I've got him winning by decision, but, with either one of these guys, a TKO is always possible. But I'm not going to bet on Slava Claus. I'm going to stay away from this one altogether, which means I might waste money on Llontop, but probably not. But Slava, he's too big of a favorite, and he's looked too weak recently. He looked very vulnerable against Chase Hooper in every possible way, but the thing I have to mention here because of the matchup is he was dropped by Chase Hooper. And of course, in the fight before that against Nazim Sadikov, he was dropped and hurt badly in that one. I was much more sure he was going to get finished there. But look, he survived against Sadikov and then battled his way back in, took over the fight, and ended up walking away with a draw. And I'll say this, in the Chase Hooper fight, first of all, he didn't tap. I think it should have been ruled a technical submission, if anything. And I do think he was clearly beaten every which way in that fight, but he still didn't quit. So who the fuck knows? Maybe he could have turned it around in round 3. I don't think so, but my point is he wanted to give himself a shot there. He doesn't have a lot of quit in him at all, but he's been dropped twice recently, and that's the main concern here against Llontop. I think both guys can probably consider this a more favorable UFC fight than most. They should be getting a striking battle here. And that's the basis for the pick. I think in a striking battle, without any real big moments to turn things around or rack up some 10-8 rounds, Slavakos wins the points battle. He's excellent. He's relentless. His body work is phenomenal. And I think he's in general faster than James Llontop. Was I calling him James? Either way, I meant to call him James. But Slavakos, I think he's better technically on the feet, and he's also very dangerous as well. Very dangerous. James has never been knocked out, whereas, of course, I just mentioned Slavakos has been rocked recently. But Slavakos doesn't, it's not about power meeting your chin. He can find that body, make you exhausted, and find a whole new way to knock you out. So he's a very dangerous guy, and that's why even though my pick is decision, I wouldn't be betting on it because I couldn't trust it. Just couldn't trust it with how dangerous he is. If he's winning, you're in trouble. But James Llontop, just like Slavakos, both of their losses, each one of their records has losses on the ground, mainly. Yeah, pretty much all of them. Chase Hooper for Slavakos, Mike Davis, Mark Giacchese. They out-wrestled him thoroughly. Chase beat him every which way, like I said. And James Llontop, he's got 2 losses by submission, the last of which we saw in his debut against Chris Padilla. Chris Padilla turned the fight around on a dime. I feel like as soon as Llontop had some success, out of desperation, Padilla shot a takedown, and everything worked for him in a short window where he turned the fight around on a dime and got Llontop out of there with a rear naked choke. Wasn't the best look, to be honest, how quickly the fight turned around. And, of course, it was a reminder that submission defense could be a problem for him because, of course, he has 2 other losses, one of which is by rear naked choke. It's 5 or 6 years ago, whatever, but still, 2 out of 3 are by rear naked choke. The other loss is by decision. But in this fight, much like I said for Slavakos, he doesn't have to worry about the grappling attack. I mean, I'm sure these guys can mix it up. I know they can. I've seen them mix it up. But they should want to keep this one on the feet. I think neither one of them is going to be able to really impose on the other one, getting the fight to the ground, and it will be kept on the feet anyway. And on the feet, speaking of imposing, I've got Slavakos winning. I've got him being technically better, overall more dangerous, and it's going to be his fight to lose. So Slavakos is the pick. I think he's faster than Llontop, and of course works everything so well where he'll be accelerating and taking over. But I'm still not going to bet on him. Again, I couldn't isolate his victory to one path, and Llontop is dangerous, and Slavakos has been rocked twice lately, dropped in his most recent 2 fights, and that's just enough doubt against a guy like Llontop to just have me stay away from him altogether. So I'll go with Slavakos winning by decision. I have no faith in it at all, and I hope we see an awesome fucking battle. Okay, up next we have Jacqueline Cavalcanti taking on Josiane Nunes. My prediction for the fight is Jacqueline Cavalcanti wins by decision. And once the props drop, I might look to bet on that because I do consider that her primary path to victory. Can't say only path to victory, but I'd be very sure if she won, it's by decision. So I can't find the courage to bet on her money line. Maybe if I shave those odds down with the prop decision, I'll bet on it. But Josiane Nunes has put enough fear into me to not bet on the money line of Cavalcanti. And with her, I think a TKO or a decision is possible, frankly. She's a fucking killer. She's more dangerous than Manel Kape. She's fucking dangerous. And Jacqueline Cavalcanti, even though she's looked very good overall, and I think a lot of her as a fighter, and I think she should win this fight, she's still only got 7 fights, and I've seen her rocked a few times. And there's just enough doubt for me to go, you know what? Maybe I'll sit this one back until some props seem a little more enticing. But I've got Cavalcanti winning. Look, she's 6-1. Her 1 loss is by split decision to Martina Jindrova in her 3rd fight. Martina Jindrova is a very good fighter, even though her record is deceptively shitty at this point. But she's a very good fighter, and that was a war. It was a split decision. Could have gone either way. Round 1 was close. I thought Jindrova landed the better shots, but she was being outstruck. Round two, Jindrova had a big moment against Cavalcanti. This is the closest she's come to being finished, where she was rocked, staggered back against a cage, and got teed off on. But she survived. She survived, kept herself safe from a 10-8 round, and reclaimed the fight in round three. And this is over one of the best girls she's fought as of now. So it was an incredible fight. My estimation of her as a fighter went way up there, but it's still her only loss. And one of the few examples of her being hurt. The other actually comes in the fight before that against Nora Cornale, who's in the UFC as well. I think these girls both made their UFC debuts at the same time on the same event. But Cornale hurt her with a spinning back fist or spinning back elbow, which spinning back anything is a special move. So it's not like I'm saying she's got a weak chin, but it rocked her and she staggered back and whatever. Just mentioning that I saw it happen. But I also saw her rock and drop Nora Cornale and in general beat her up, get the better of her for 15 minutes. It wasn't like it was a 30-25 ass kicking. But still, I thought she was the better fighter then. This was in her second fight. But still a great win. The girl made it to the UFC. And since then, she's gotten a few good finishes and then won 5-round fight over this girl, Melissa Croden, where she had a lot of success early, almost took her out with a TKO, dropped her multiple times in this one sequence, but wasn't able to close the show and still showed no weakness in her cardio, going 25 minutes. Same goes with her UFC debut against Zara Farn. Between those fights, the fight against Martina Jindrova, where again she showed back up in round three, I really have a lot of faith in Cavalcanti and all of her traits, and especially her cardio. Here she's fighting Josiane Nunes, who has her beat with power, I think, despite being half her size. But I think Cavalcanti's the better striker. She's better technically. She's very comfortable on the back foot, and I do think she'll be on the back foot here. And that's what she showed against Zara Farn. Zara Farn was trying to pressure her, and Cavalcanti just cleanly outstruck her, and by a wide margin, pretty much all on the back foot. And I think she's got a lot going for her in this matchup, and she'll be able to stand up to the pressure and style and the power and style of Josiane Nunes. And when she's not winning this fight, if she's not winning this fight on the outside, she can crash inside and be the stronger woman. That's how Josiane Nunes lost against Chelsea Chandler. Chelsea Chandler, one of the two people to beat Josiane Nunes, was simply too big. That was the story of the loss. Her other loss comes in her debut or maybe her second fight, and it's the Taila Santos, who's incredible, almost beat Valentina, and she's fighting for $1 million championship in October or November against another really good girl. But Josiane Nunes is more dangerous. She's got a lot of knockouts. She's got serious knockout power. She hits like fucking Manel Cobb. And I think with the few times Cavalcanti's been rocked, compounded by the fact that Nunes hits like Manel Cop, it's got me worried enough to not have bet on the money line of Cavalcanti. But I do think Josiane Nunes, with that next level power, if she has one of those moments, she can close the show and take over the fight. That's why if I'm looking to bet on Nunes, I couldn't even tell you if it'd be by decision or knockout. I think it'd be one or the other, though. Now she's going to win by triangle choke. But she doesn't have a submission win. That's not going to happen. And again, she's fighting a much stronger physical force in Jacqueline Cavalcanti. She's got so much height and reach on her. Of course, Josiane Nunes has dealt with height and reach. Her last win comes over Zara Farn, just like Cavalcanti. Zara Farn is gigantic, and she was giving trouble to Josiane early on. But Josiane was able to weather the storm and then take over, outland her, and beat her up and win a decision there. She also beat, before that, Ramona Pasquale by decision, another big, strong girl, maybe not the most talented girl, but big and strong. She knocked out Bea Malecki, who may not be strong, but she's big. She's incredibly tall, and she knocked her out with one punch in her UFC debut. And before that, all knockouts, and a lot of them in the second round for Josiane Nunes. She's just a very dangerous girl. She keeps coming, and she looks incredibly tough. Her assets, her traits have been there for her as well. She doesn't have bad cardio at all, and she keeps her power down the stretch, and she's incredibly durable. However, the one trait that I guess I'm relying on by making this pick is her size. It's a trait that has failed her before, failed her against Chelsea Chandler in a big way, and I'm picking Cavalcanti to beat her by decision, and size being a good portion of it, a good part of it. So Cavalcanti by decision is the pick. Staying away from the money line, I'll look to bet on Cavalcanti by decision, but I might not even do that because Josiane Nunes scares me. I think she can win this fight by taking over with her power. So might just stay away from this one altogether. Next up, we have Dennis Buzukja versus Danny Silva. My prediction for the fight is Danny Silva wins a close decision. And I say close because that's my reason for not betting on him. Not going to bet on him. Not betting on Dennis either, frankly. I think I'm just going to stay away from this one altogether, which means I'm going to bet on draw at plus 5,000. But I do have Danny Silva winning just because I have a lot of faith in him. He's got a 9-1 record, and he's looked good even in his loss, kind of. I thought he definitely lost against a guy, Kanan Kawaiha, or whatever. But it was a close fight, and in the end, he took over in round 3 after losing rounds 1 and 2. He was being outstruck, kind of chasing after the guy, being outstruck on the back foot, and also being taken down with some very timely takedowns. But then in round 3 came alive, and in the end forced a majority decision. Not a bad look for his one loss, and another fight in which he showed good cardio. He's got good cardio. He can go for 15 hard minutes. He's won his last 2 fights by decision, to his 2 best victories over Angel Pacheco on the Contender Series, where he almost steamrolled him in like 3 seconds and then still went 15 hard minutes. And he beat Josh Kulabau in his UFC debut, where Josh Kulabau I considered to be an above average UFC fighter. At least I did at the time after his decision making on Saturday. I don't know. But still a very solid victory for your debut. Hard fought win, split decision, but one thing that you can't blame was his cardio. The guy shows up, he's got good cardio, he's very tough, never been finished. He was submitted as an amateur. I don't know that. But he avenged that loss by decision as a pro. So there's that. But submission shouldn't be such a big factor in this matchup anyway. And I do think Danny Silva should win on the feet. I just think he's a little sharper, faster, and again, he's got every trait going for him. Dennis Buzukja, he's got a lot of great traits, but I have to mention the knockout loss, even if it was to a very good fighter in Jamal Emmers. He was knocked out in a minute a few fights ago. So he's 26 years old. He's healthy. I'm sure he's past it, but it did happen, and it happened a year ago or so. But his other losses are all by decision. He lost to Sean Woodson and Melsik Bagdasaryan. Melsik beat him on the Contender Series like 4 years ago, and then he lost to Woodson in his UFC debut. He took that fight on short notice, and Sean Woodson's a fucking unique problem for anybody in the division just because of his frame and style. But Buzukja hung in there tough, and Sean Woodson was even working submissions and things, but he kept himself safe, and on very short notice, gave himself a UFC career with that losing effort. He lost to Melsik on the Contender Series. Melsik Bagdasaryan, I believe he's still in the UFC. Pure striker, really. And it was a rough matchup for him because Buzukja is not really such a strong grappler, even though he trains with Sarah Longo. He's only got 1 submission, and it was in his last fight before getting to the UFC. But it's still just not his bread and butter. He did try to force takedowns on Melsik and did get him to the ground and arguably won round 2, mixing things up, and also landed a bunch of great shots as well. But he was a step behind in that fight. And then his other loss was in his second fight, so it doesn't really matter, but it's by decision to a wrestler, Nick Rodriguez. And again, wrestling, might play more of a factor than jiu-jitsu in this fight, but I think this is a striking battle mainly. And the striking battle, I favor Danny Silva. I side with him with the intangibles and with the technique. I don't think it's going to be a dominant victory. I think if he doesn't knock out Dennis Buzukja, which I don't think he will, Buzukja will keep coming. He will maybe be stronger in tight. Maybe he's even more powerful. And he'll use that power to rip you to the body and slow you down. And I think this is going to be a hard-earned victory, but still a decision victory for Danny Silva. That is the prediction. I don't have a lot of faith in it. I might bet on it, but again, the money line minus 245 is nowhere near enticing enough. So, whatever. Next up, we have Jose Medina taking on Zachary Reese. My prediction for this fight is Zachary Reese wins, and I've got him winning by steamrolling Medina. And I will maybe look to bet on that. His odds aren't nearly as big as the odds of Cong. But at the same time, I will be looking to bet on Jose Medina winning down the stretch. Jose Medina's primary trait is toughness. And I haven't even seen all of his fights. You know me, I want to see everything I can get my hands on. I think I've only seen 3 fights, his last 3. But really, you just need the Contender Series fight, which got him this contract, to show you his heart. He's got a lot of toughness, and I think if he doesn't get taken out early, it's a very interesting fight. Not because I expect Zachary Reese to fall apart, but because I don't expect Jose Medina to fall apart. And Zachary Reese hasn't been to round 2 as a pro. Most of his fights end in under half a round, which, by the way, I'll be looking to play that. Nothing serious, but just wasting sprinkles on under a half a round for Zachary Reese. He's fighting an incredibly tough guy, so I don't even know if knockout is likely here, although, Zachary seems dangerous enough where, yeah, it is. But the submission as well, it's a big threat. The guy's a tornado of offense early on, and I think he's much better than Jose Medina early when they're firing on all cylinders. I haven't seen Zachary Reese in a competitive fight yet, though. His one loss was to Cody Brundage a few months ago in his UFC debut. He was slammed. I think it was the second slam of the night, the first one happening in the fight before that. But that doesn't tell you much about a fighter. I feel like anybody can kind of be slammed. Maybe it's a strike against his overall durability, but it's not his chin. It's not likely to happen again unless he's fighting fucking Rampage Jackson. And it's not something I can count on betting-wise. Plus, Jose Medina, I don't think, has that kind of strength and physicality. But in the few fights I've seen, Jose Medina has grappled. That's the one finish I saw him get over the guy Cesar Benitez. Came and went. It was like a 2-minute fight, but it happened on the ground, advanced the full mount over a guy who didn't know what he was doing, but he did, and he got the victory. And then this other fight, which I don't even know if I saw the fight, Fernando Luis da Costa Filo. Sherdog says it was a 5-round split decision. I've seen 2 videos of the fight. It was a 3-round decision, unless it's a different fight. But in that fight, he won by outlasting Filo, who cracked him at the end of round 1, was beating him up early, and then had a dominant round 1, and he survived after getting dropped, and then he started out wrestling, striking his way into takedowns, and just grinding Filo. It wasn't the most thrilling performance or whatever, but it showed a lot of his traits. It came through for him with a nice victory, which got him the shot on the Contender Series and got him into the UFC and the rest of it. And cardio. Well, I mean, I can't say he looked like fucking Gamrot out there, or Dan Hooker maybe, but he won rounds 2 and 3 by changing gears, and he won it with grappling. So, and by the way, I don't even think the fight ended at after 3 rounds. I think it ended like a few seconds short, and it was like a technical decision. I don't know how Sherdog got 5-round split decision, but again, I don't even know what the fuck I'm watching. So maybe it was a totally different person. But still, he's a guy who showed incredible toughness in his Contender Series debut, going into a wood chipper, eating Showtime kicks, spinning elbows against Gaji Yazulov, and he did not fold, and he showed enough heart and tenacity in the small windows where he could have, and it was enough to win Dana White over. Maybe that and his kids and whatever gave Dana the guilt trip, but it was enough. And that's his one loss in the last however many years. The two losses before that are to Antonio Gordillo 5 years ago by decision. Wasn't able to see that, but that guy's a good fighter. And then he lost by submission to a journeyman, a rear naked choke. Look, I know it's possible. You could just tell he's not the most refined fighter. And I think Zachary Reese has him outgunned in every way, technically. But technique falls apart after round one, and certainly after round two. And Zachary Reese has never been there. He's been fighting MMA for a long time. I still wish I could have seen his one decision, which was a loss to Kevin Holland as an amateur fight, a 9-minute fight in 2012. I wasn't able to see that. I've tried every time I've broken him down. I've looked for the footage, can't find it anywhere. I found him quoting about it and whatever, but still wish I could have seen the fight. Every other fight is a steamrolling. He steamrolls everybody, and that's my prediction here. I just have to go with the upside every now and then. So the prediction is Zachary Reese gets it done. I've got him getting it done early. Might take a stab at under half a round or round one. I would favor submission over TKO for Zachary Reese, but it might be safer to just play the round one finish. And for Jose Medina, I don't know what his win looks like, but I don't think it's in round one. Although that's the one time Zachary Reese has lost. So what do I know? But Jose Medina's toughness is his greatest asset, and he's shown enough traits in the few fights I've seen him in where, yeah, I'll take a stab on him down the stretch. So this is one where I plan on wasting fucking money. Next up, we have Edmund Shahbazyan versus Gerald Meerschaert. Okay, my prediction is Edmund Shahbazyan. You know, right away when I start using the hands, I'm going to give you a bunch of bullshit. All right, this over here, let's put this aside so I could talk about all this shit and fucking confuse you. MMA al dente here. I'm picking Shahbazyan, but look, I'm always talking about traits and bets and props and whatever. This is a fight where you can go watch any video I've made about Gerald Meerschaert or Edmund Shahbazyan. Their strengths and weaknesses plug into each other. This is one where I play the props. I mean, I'd play the props for either guy, the same props against any other fighter, just because I have so much faith in their traits. But put them against each other, and I can't resist. I mean, I've got to do it. Gerald Meerschaert winning by submission later and finish later in general, because Shahbazyan's only been TKO'd. But the submission skill is really what makes Meerschaert, and especially down the stretch. And the early stoppage from Shahbazyan, which is my pick. I've got Shahbazyan winning. I may as well go with round one knockout. Meerschaert at the UFC level, generally, he's only been finished early by stoppage. Jack Hermansson's the one guy to submit him with that monster guillotine. But generally, he's been TKO'd, and that plugs into Edmund Shahbazyan's strengths. He's an excellent kickboxer, and when he's firing on all cylinders, in round one especially, he's on fire and he's pure danger. And I do envision him knocking out Gerald Meerschaert. But what if he misses? That's a Usual Suspects reference. Which, by the way, if you've never seen that movie, don't look anything up. Just go watch that fucking movie. You've probably heard about it. It's 30 years old. Listen to me. But Edmund Shahbazyan, I think the reason I'm picking him here is his losses are due to cardio first and foremost, and also due to grappling. A combination of both in every loss. But generally, he's lost to guys whose physicality I don't think Gerald Meerschaert can match. He's just not the beast of a wrestler and overall beast that Derek Brunson and Jack Hermansson are, or even Nassourdine Imavov. Physically, he might be a close match to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, considering he's got my physique. But Fluffy is one of the only other guys who is a reliable danger down the stretch like Meerschaert. Everybody else, their submission skills turn to shit. But Gerald Meerschaert, if you find yourself in a head and arm position with him in round three, it's over. You're tapping in 10 seconds to one choke or another. And that's what makes him a big threat, Mearshart. More than grounding and elbowing and TKOing, although I could see him winning that fight if he's able to get on top of Shahbazyan, because I could see Shahbazyan succumbing to that same type of pressure. But if he's not able to get there in the first place, what makes Mearshart better than the other guys that have beaten Shahbazyan is that he's a better submission artist. Mearshart is a better submission artist than he is a grappler. And he's a better grappler than he is a wrestler, unfortunately. But the submission skills down the stretch is what makes him GM3. And I think in round 3, with everybody's got cardio issues in round 3. Everybody's slowing down. But if Shahbazyan, who has a history of slowing down, runs into any precarious positions in round 3, I've got Mearshart winning. And by the way, same could be said for round 2, by the way. So I will be betting on the props for Mearshart. I say submission is much more likely, even though Shahbazyan's never been submitted and all of his ground losses are by TKO. But I still think no matter what, it would be a late finish if Edmund Shahbazyan was finished, and cardio would be the primary issue. That'd be how you remember the loss. So the pick is Shahbazyan. I've got him winning by round 1 knockout, let's say. And I will look to bet on that. He's not such a big favorite. Those odds might be doable, at least as a hedge. But really, I'll be looking for the long shots to hit on Gerald Mearshart winning down the stretch. Like I said, I'd favor submission over TKO, but Shahbazyan's never been submitted and blah, 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 blah. So I'll see what the props drop there, what they say. But this is one where I'm just playing the props. But the pick is Shahbazyan by round 1 knockout. Okay, up next we have Michael Morales versus Neil Magny. My prediction is Michael Morales wins, and my bet is on Neil Magny, the veteran of all veterans, who is sitting at 6-1 odds right now, plus 575, close to 6-1. I can't believe the odds here. I still think Michael Morales will win, so again, it's not going to be a gigantic bet, but they're just lopsided odds on this card, and this is the biggest shock to me. I mean, Neil Magny, he is much more proven than a Victoria Leonardo. And as good as Michael Morales is, and I think he's very good, and there's a lot less doubt than there is in a guy like Mike Malott or whatever, but he's still fighting Neil Magny. He's got an incredible record, passed so many tests and whatever, but Neil Magny is a problem for anybody that can weigh 170 pounds. I expect him to lose and lose comfortably. Don't get me wrong. But even if it ends up being lopsided like the Ian Gary fight, I won't hate myself for betting on Neil Magny at 6-1 odds. I bet on him, and I believe I even picked him to beat Mike Malott. And that wasn't a pretty fight either. He was dominated up until the final minute. But every trade he had was used in that fight. It was there for him. And he turned the fight around and got him out of there in the final minute. I don't expect that here. Michael Morales has twice the experience of Mike Malott. He's also got a lot of high-level experience just in the UFC fights. He's gone the distance and had good wins over Jake Matthews and Max Griffin and whoever else. He's a solid fighter who's already proven. Plus, he's got that wrestling base, and also he hits like a fucking truck. So I think it's a totally different threat than Mike Malott. And that's why he's my pick to win, because there's so much upside with Michael Morales. But despite all the experience, and he's got 16 fights over the course of 7 years, it's a lot of experience. Well, maybe not compared to other fighters or whatever, but still 16 fights is a lot. And he's already in the UFC for a few years now with 4 fights. So there's not a lot of doubt with Michael Morales, but it's just Neil Magny has earned enough of my faith to bet on him at those odds against anybody. And you have to look to a fight like Mike Malott, even though those were, Mike Malott, my biggest concern with him was his cardio. And that is not an issue with Michael Morales. In fact, it's the opposite. I trust his cardio. So again, it is a totally different fight. But Neil's the same guy that turned the tables against Hector Lombard years ago in a fucking war, where he was losing like a 10-7 round, and then it turned into like a 10-8 Magny round. It was just the craziest fight ever. He beat Daniel Rodriguez 2 years ago, or whatever, by Darce choke in round three. That was one where he needed to put his foot on the gas and take over that fight, and he did so against a really good fighter. And of course, I can point to his losses. Gilbert Burns went through him with ease, like RDA did, and Shavkat. And he was beaten the last time around by Ian Gary by decision, but in a lopsided fight. He's lost every which way, Neil Magny. And it looks like Michael Morales is so good where he's got to find one of these ways to beat Neil. And I do think he will. But again, he's way too big of a favorite. Way too big of a favorite. Those should be his odds against a fucking 10-year-old girl, but not Neil Magny. And I would load up on him at minus 850 against a 10-year-old girl, by the way. But here with Neil Magny, I'm not loading up on Neil, much like every other fight I've broken down on this card. And believe me, I'm starting to make myself sick just saying these fucking words. But it's worth a shot on the massive underdog. So another $2.83 that I'll waste on an underdog. Next up, we have the Ultimate Fighter middleweight finale between Ryan Loder and Robert Valentin. My prediction for this fight is Ryan Loder wins. I'll go with him winning by decision. He is an underdog, so I'll look to bet on him. The lines haven't come out yet on DraftKings, but according to bestfightodds.com, he's a plus 130 underdog as of now, or plus 128. And I think his wrestling will carry him to a victory. That's my hunch anyway. But he's fighting a guy in Robert Valentin who he can't take chances with. This guy's incredibly dangerous. I'd say twice as dangerous as Ryan Loder. And he's also got twice the experience of Ryan Loder. Robert Valentin has a 10-3 record. In his 10 wins, he's got 9 finishes. 6 of them come by submission and 3 by knockout or TKO. And then just 1 decision. And his 2 fights on The Ultimate Fighter are 1 big knockout and 1 big submission. I think they're both in round 1, too. So you got to add that to his danger. But yeah, the guy's incredibly dangerous. Really violent guy. And I think, I can't say if anybody gets the finish, it's Robert Valentin, but he's definitely more of the finisher. The thing is, he's been finished before as well. His 3 losses include 2 by finish. So there's that. He lost once to this guy, Ahmed Salamov, who got him out of there with a knee bar in round 3. The guy, Ahmed Salamov, was dominating him, had him taken down and mounted in every round. This was a little over 2 years ago, by the way. And then in round 3, it didn't look like he was completely gassed early, Robert Valentin. But once he got taken down again and mounted, he was, it was the beginning of the end. And he ended up scrambling out but getting caught in a knee bar and was forced to tap. Cardio was definitely an issue there, even though a knee bar would make you tap 10 seconds into the fight. His other loss by finish is to Ibo Aslan, who made his UFC debut against Anton Turkalj a few months ago in a rematch where he got a nice late finish. But that's his other late finish over Robert Valentin. I think that guy Ibo Aslan, every other win of his is a dominant first-round victory. But Robert Valentin ended up taking him into round 3, and he was able to take him down. He actually mounted Ibo a few times, but he wasn't able to make it work on the ground. And then in round 3, the guy was just too dangerous still and knocked him out, TKO'd him 2 minutes into the round. I can't say it was totally due to cardio because that guy Ibo is really dangerous, but I still feel like it's no coincidence that both of his finish losses are in round 3, very deep into the fight. His other loss is a decision to Giatti Milan, who I know lost to Christian Leroy Duncan in exciting fashion. But that guy Milan just took him down and mounted him. All 3 rounds, he was scrambling and he got up every time and whatever, but that was still the story of the fight. He was taken down and mounted. It's been 5 years since then, but again, he lost that guy Salamov with a lot of that same type of shit a few years later, just 2 years ago. So he's not a perfect fighter, and of course he's been hurt. I have to mention that submission when he got over the guy Patty, whatever, on the Ultimate Fighter, had him rocked. Seen him rocked in that fight. Of course, he got knocked out by Ibo Aslan, and the guy Pietro Panini had him hurt too with Travis Brown elbows. That's his one no contest on his record. It was ended with Travis Brown elbows, but they were illegal, I think, to the back of the head or whatever. It was stopped, but it was a moment. Of course, he avenged that loss by dropping the guy and then mauling him and submitting him all inside of a round. So he did his part in erasing that memory. But the guy's incredibly dangerous. You just have to look to the Ultimate Fighter fights. Again, he faced adversity in that second one, was really up against the ropes, up against the cage, literally, and he was hurt. But he turned it into a grappling match. I think he hit a head and arm throw and then hit a nice submission, like a scarf hold, head and arm shoulder lock, where you lock the arm with the legs and forced a tap. It's a rare submission, but the guy's one of those crafty weirdos. And by the way, he was definitely the Diego Sanchez of the season. Fucking weirdo. He's on his own planet. And that's fun and whatever. And I do think it'd be more fun if he won, but I'm picking against him here. This guy, Ryan Loder, he's a pure wrestler. A lot of times looks like a pure wrestler. And for his sake, I hope he stays a pure wrestler. I hope his takedowns only get sharper and he doesn't start developing an overhand right or whatever, or left. I forget what his stance even is. I think he's no, he's a southpaw, I believe. He actually knocked a guy down with a right-handed jab or like a weird hook. It's one of the weirdest punches I've ever seen. But that's his biggest moment as far as danger on the feet goes. Otherwise, Ryan Loder always gets it done on the ground. He does have 4 stoppages in his 6 wins. I think I might have seen all of them. He roughed one guy up with a slam in his debut and then elbowed him out of there. He got Leon Shahbazyan, who was knocking on the door of the UFC a few years ago. He steamrolled him in a minute, just ripped him to the mat a few times, caught him in a bad position, elbowed the shit out of him. His one loss is a split decision to this guy, Troy Green. It was a year and a half ago on the Uriah Faber show where he fought a few fights. And it was a split decision. Really could have gone either way. You could see he wasn't going to have his way, Ryan Loder, with the wrestling, but he impressed me by, first of all, not completely falling apart, but making it competitive. The guy is comfortable enough standing, just not such a big threat or anything. But he looks like he's got a lot of good traits, and, he wasn't able to really impose himself in that fight, but still, he kept it close. And I trust him to be able to secure position on Robert Valentin. I don't have that much trust in him, but enough trust to bet on him. He's looked really sharp on the Ultimate Fighter. His 2 wins are a more of a grindy, boring decision in the semifinals, and then in the quarterfinals, he got a nice submission, pretty quickly too, an arm triangle from the top. And he does have danger. Again, he's got those 4 TKOs. One of them was from a violent slam. But if he secures position, he's pretty damn violent. But I think as he starts fighting better fighters, we're going to see more of what we saw in that semifinal fight on the Ultimate Fighter, where he slows down and tries to slow the fight down and win with position. And I think here, with the contract on the line, he's going to be looking to minimize the risks because he's fighting such a violent, fucking incredibly dangerous guy, Robert Valentin. And like I said, even though he's been mounted in a lot of his losses, Valentin, and controlled, he was still able to scramble up every time, just about, or a lot of times, and still fighting. But I am going with Loder. I think ultimately the top game will be the difference. I think he's good enough to get Robert Valentin there and smart enough to hold him there and not take too many risks. Danger could be a factor. Again, he's gotten a good amount of TKOs, but I'd be surprised if he went through Robert Valentin on the ground. I think Robert Valentin, maybe he can be rocked on the standing up. Like I said, I've seen him hurt a few times and uh, finished even once. But I don't think Ryan Loder is going to go through him like that. So the pick is Ryan Loder. I've got him winning by decision. I will look to bet on him. Of course, I'll wait for the props, but not a lot of faith here because I've just gotten to know these guys. Next up, we have the co-main event, Angela Hill versus Tabitha Ricci. My prediction for this fight, and I'll admit I've gone back and forth on this one, but I've settled on Angela Hill. Obviously, I don't have the most faith in it, but Angela Hill has made a believer out of me in the last few years. She's an incredible fighter, such a shitty record, but every loss of hers is in the UFC, and most of those decision losses are really tough fights, and some of them you could argue she won. The Michelle Wooderson fight, the fucking Amanda Lemos fight, etc. And she's always been very tough, stood up to the hardest hitters. She's still incredibly healthy, even at 39 years old, no weakness about her. And the one weakness she used to have, submission defense, I'd say that's been patched up after getting her ass kicked by Mackenzie Dern for 5 rounds. But she's really evolved as a fighter. Her wrestling defense, her takedown defense has gotten better. She's also started mixing in her own grappling here and there. Of course, I have to mention her getting her one submission victory in her 30th fight last time and probably her 25th UFC fight against Luana Pinheiro. Angela Hill, she's in her prime right now, and I've got to side with her. But this is a fight that I would have been picking Tabitha Ricci to win not long ago. Really before her last 2 fights. Her last 2 fights are split decisions, one victory and one defeat, but she wasn't able to be the dominant force, ripping her opponent to the mat. Against Tisha Torres, she scratched and clawed for a victory, but that was pretty close, no? And against Lupita Godinez, that was more of a wild fight. That was a lot of fun, but still, she got outpointed and hit with some of the bigger shots. Each girl dropped the other one, but still, a close fight, but a loss for her. And I do feel like Angela Hill is on that level with those girls, which doesn't mean they're all the same fighter. I've always considered Hill in general easier to take down than those other girls. But I think Angela Hill has patched up her takedown defense and all of her other skills to the point where I do slightly favor her to win this fight. I think she's got activity on the outside, and Tabitha Ricci probably does hit harder, and she's stronger in tight. But Angela Hill, if she gets in tight, she starts roughing you up. She's got Muay Thai and shit to take away the physicality. She mixes things up, and on the outside, she's faster than most. I think she's faster here than Ricci, and I think in a points battle, I'd give Hill the nod for her activity. Of course, if Tabitha Ricci wins the wrestling battle, she's going to win this fight. And that is the fight that I envisioned her having against Angela Hill a few years ago. Not that I ever really imagined it. But if you told me these girls were going to fight 2 years ago, I would have said, yeah, Ricci rips her to the mat. Like she did to Poliana Viana and Maria Oliveira and whoever else. But again, Hill is in her prime right now at fucking 40 years old or whatever. And I've got to go with her. It's not like these victories have been easy for Angela Hill either. Scratching and Cong, but beating a lot of good fighters. Lupita Godinez, she beat by a good decision. Denise Gomes last year got her out of there by decision. She didn't get her out of there. But she got Luana Pinheiro out of there with a round 2 guillotine choke. And her one real loss in the last 2 years is to Mackenzie Dern. And even though it wasn't anything close to a victory, she still showed a lot of great traits as a fighter, and she showed that she patched up a lot of those holes as she was being dominated, I guess. I don't know what point I'm making here. But Ricci's got 2 losses. It's easier to talk about those than Angela Hill's 13 losses. Her first loss was to Manon Fior. I think she took the fight on very short notice and she moved up in weight. And obviously, Manon Fior is fighting for a title probably this year, or she could be anyway. I don't know. There's no shame in that loss. But she was still stopped in round 2, just wasn't able to stand up to the danger of Manon Fior. And her other loss is that split decision I talked about to Lupita Godinez. Very close fight, exciting fight, and she showed a lot of great traits in the rest of it, but that was one where her wrestling was taken off the table generally, and she was outpointed. So that's what I'm going with here, Angela Hill, to remove that wrestling or make it a small part of the fight and to win a tight points battle. I don't have a lot of faith in it, though. I don't know if I'll bet on it anyway, even when the props drop, because it could always be burnt by fucking decision. But Hill is the pick. And in the main event of the evening, we have Caio Borralho taking on Jared Cannonier. My prediction for the fight is Caio Borralho wins. And I'll go with a late TKO stoppage, even though that doesn't make all that much sense. But a decision wouldn't surprise me. That's typically how he's won in the UFC. And I think this will be a great test for him. This is such an intriguing fight because Jared Cannonier, whatever he's ranked, he's near the top. And Caio Borralho, he can't be denied anymore as some sort of up-and-comer or whatever. He's here, and I'm glad this fight is here in front of him. Caio Borralho is my pick to win this fight, like I said, because there's not a lot of doubt with him. He's already had a lot of competitive fights in the UFC, and in the end, he always wins them. Mostly by decision. He was able to knock out Paul Craig, and he was able to submit Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, who hasn't. But Caio Borralho has always had that next gear, able to reclaim control in round 3, and he's been a good, reliable decision fighter when he's needed to be. So here, even though he's going 5 rounds for the first time in his career, it's not like a big concern. Oh, how's he going to do down the stretch? I think he'll be fine, unless he eats a lot of body shots or whatever. That might slow you down. But I've got him winning here against Jared because I think on the feet, even though on paper I'd say he's outgunned, in the octagon, which isn't on paper, he's a very difficult athlete, Caio Borralho. I think he's got advantages even in the striking realm early, just because he's that much quicker than Jared Cannonier. But Jared Cannonier is very powerful. He's definitely the bigger knockout threat in this matchup and in most matchups he'll have in his career. The guy hits like a tank. And that's definitely where he can take over this fight. Not even just with the power to turn the fight around on a dime and TKO him, but winning the fight with winning a striking battle. We've seen him throw hard. I got to go back to that fight against Marvin Vettori last year. That was him throwing hard for 5 rounds. And again, there are very few guys who can throw as hard as he can in the first place. But he threw 1,000 punches and kept mixing it up for 5 rounds and looked incredible. That was a fight where it wasn't too competitive. Maybe started off that way, but then he completely took over. So it's not like it was the biggest test for his cardio and all the rest of it, but it's still the best he looked, and he went 5 hard rounds. Of course, I got to go to the fight before that against Sean Strickland. Say what you will about the decision. It was very close. I scored it for Strickland. What do you want from me? But Jared was throwing hard again for 5 rounds, and he probably got outlanded. I forget the story of the fight with the numbers, but he landed the harder strikes, Jared Cannonier. And that was another fight where it was all there for him for 5 rounds. So he's definitely a potentially stylistically dangerous matchup for Caio Borralho. If he can keep the fight standing and take away the wrestling, like he has the beastly middleweight wrestlers, top guys like Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori, then he can bully him around. And I'm not saying he'll just steamroll Caio Borralho, but it's going to be tough for Caio Borralho to win a kickboxing bout, I think, for 5 rounds against Jared Cannonier. I think he's better on the feet than even I gave him credit for, Caio Borralho. But I think those athletic advantages would slip away over the course of the first few rounds. And then he'd be stuck in there with a guy who's thrown for 5 hard rounds against Sean Strickland and come out a winner, Jared Cannonier. Cannonier, the reality is he has only lost 3 times as a middleweight. Nassourdine Imavov got him out of there in round 4 in his last fight, which the stoppage wasn't the greatest, but he wasn't at his greatest either, in my opinion, in that fight, and I thought Imavov was going to win. But his other 2 losses are decisions to Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. 2 of the best ever. And he was able to stand tall to both of them, even though Adesanya was kind of in cruise control because Jared wasn't able to force a fight out of it. And Robert Whittaker actually hurt him very badly in the end with his 1-2 head kick combination. And Jared was able to survive that. And that was a good look because before that, he had mostly lost by TKO, Jared Cannonier. Well, I don't know about mostly, but 2 losses by TKO anyway. Dominic Reyes at light heavyweight and Sean Jordan at heavyweight. Sean Jordan's an incredibly athletic heavyweight. In his day, he was one of those back-flipping Bam Bam Bigelow types. And he was too fast and powerful, and he ended up knocking out Cannonier. Dominic Reyes, same thing. Big, strong, fast, and powerful. That was the Dominic Reyes that would go on to knock out Chris Weidman and almost beat Jones and maybe beat Anthony Smith in a few months. But uh, those are different losses, light heavyweight and heavyweight. At middleweight, like I said, he's been very successful despite getting finished in his last fight. And despite being 40 years old and not looking his best in his last fight, he was 39 and looked the best he ever looked in the fight before that. So Jared Cannonier could be about to turn a corner, and I guess that is my prediction here, that Kyle Borralho wins. I would think if he does win a decision, there's a good amount of grappling where he is able to take Cannonier down. Cannonier historically has been taken down, but again, by bigger, better guys. Glover Teixeira, Jan Blachowicz, fucking championship monsters at light heavyweight. But Kyle is an exceptionally skillful fighter. There's no real reason to doubt him. His 1 loss comes in his second fight, I believe. And it was a fight that I've seen at least a good amount of it on YouTube, where I forget what the fuck happened anyway. I've seen it. I watched it recently this week against this guy, Joao Carvalho or whatever. But it was in 2015. Doesn't really matter. And by the way, I think he was doing well in the fight. He got on top of the guy in round 1. Round 2, he also got on top of him as well. I don't know what happened in that fight. I wasn't able to see round 3, but that's his only loss. Regardless, he's obviously improved as a fighter, and here in the UFC, he's been undefeated, looked exceptional, and he's starting to get finishes. And I trust him to find a way to beat Jared Cannonier. So Kyle Borralho is the pick. I will go with him winning by decision, despite all that shit I was just saying about finishes. But as for the bet, I'm not betting on him. I might bet on him. I'm thinking about it, but I haven't bet on him yet. And I don't know. Probably stay away from this one. This is just a card where I'm not betting a lot at all. I'm wasting money on fucking long shot props. But the few competitive fights, the odds, I feel like they have them just right where I don't feel too compelled to bet on anybody. So it is what it is. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.